Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me with you today. As David mentioned, my name is Sara Green. I am the Interim Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Enhancing Student Opportunities with the Oregon Department of Education. I began my career in education in 1984 and retired in 2016 from Eugene School District. And even now, at my relative young age, over the course of my time in education, many things changed. I never could have believed back in 1984 in my classroom that had no whiteboard, no telephone, no computer, no document camera, that 37 years later, I would be working from home, meeting across video as a way of accomplishing a day's work. Change is the one thing we can always count on. I'd like to begin this morning by sharing a little story and experience with you about my second week at OESO. Some of you may know Eric Wells. He is a director of our school age program here in Oregon. He brought one of his calm mindfulness activities to our leadership team. The 3 statements you see here were shared during that activity. May you be happy, may you be strong, may you feel like you belong. As a team, we worked through a brief activity and adopted these statements to share broadly across OESO, our Office of Enhancing Student Opportunities, and beyond. Well, our team has shared these 3 wishes with our OESO team, and today is the beyond. Harsh truth. We are tired of being strong. We are done with times being challenging. We are far beyond overhearing "you're muted," and we're ready to rebuild and regroup. Now we just need the energy to do it. In order to be fully present, we need to consciously address self-care and help our minds and souls feel supported in the work ahead. I don't have all the best ideas on how to do it. Just do it. Start by making it simple. Do one thing for yourself right now. So get comfortable. I don't care if you stay seated or you stand up, whatever works best for you. If your camera's on, turn it off. Maybe even close your eyes if you'd like to. Now take a moment and think about someone you love and care about. You have that person in mind. Now imagine you are sending them these 3 wishes. May you be happy. May you be strong. May you feel like you belong. How will they respond? How do the words you say impact them? I wonder. Now consider someone that you have trouble getting along with. Someone maybe you don't agree with very often. I think of my sister sometimes when I consider these statements. Imagine sending them these 3 wishes. May you be happy. May you be strong. May you feel like you belong. How do they react or respond? Does it make their day? You may never know, but you'll likely both feel better because you took the time to say it. Now consider a day you've had recently where you felt depleted, deleted, frustrated, or empty. And imagine telling yourself, may you be happy, may you be strong, and may you feel like you belong. These same feelings of happiness, strength, and belonging are vital for us adults to engender in ourselves to ensure that our students have these same reinforcements and wishes developed in them. A flat balloon can't fly. These are 3 wishes that I wish for each of you as you enter this next phase of education in the time of pandemic. May you be happy, may you be strong, and may you feel like you belong. Stay comfortable in whatever form or fashion that works for you. And thank you for joining me on that brief adventure. And I hope it was an inspiring and peaceful beginning to your day. Fewer than 50% of children experiencing disabilities are served in inclusive settings, which includes a smaller subset of higher needs children that are more likely to experience lifelong segregation. Recently, Meredith Villains, who is a member of our ECSC team, shared this statistic at an OESO all-staff meeting. I share it with you today for your consideration and contemplation. I also share it to help inform us about how, in my case, the advantages that my white skin, my education, my access to educators, my privilege, my ability to advocate, and my income helped to ensure that my child was included, that he avoided having a lifelong experience of being considered less than and left out, being seen as not eligible for a general education classroom setting. In 1994, having watched my son learn and grow with his 2 older siblings, I knew the value of learning and engaging with typically developing peers. And as his mother, I worked hard to get it. My knowledge and experience gave me the tools to know how best to achieve an inclusive educational experience for my 2.5-year-old son. It's not simple to create, but I truly wish no parent or teacher ever had to advocate again, that we would actually have all we need to educate students well and student needs are met or exceeded. Advocacy then would become irrelevant. We'd have no need for it. According to the Children's Equity Project, only 13% of children identified with multiple disabilities and 17% of children identified with intellectual disabilities spend the majority of their day in general education classes, compared to about 2/3 of all other children experiencing disabilities. Black children are overrepresented in special education, but not in early intervention, though some scholars have recently contested this finding. In examining the intersections between race and disability, Black children are at least twice as likely to be identified with an intellectual disability or emotional disturbance than all other racial ethnic groups combined. Children experiencing these disabilities are less likely to spend time in general education classrooms than their peers experiencing other disabilities. In some places, the result is segregated special education placements that tend to mirror racial segregation patterns of the past. Other major barriers to inclusion are ableism, which influences teacher and administrator attitudes and beliefs around the inclusion of students with disabilities. Lack of educator training to guide the use of practices that support inclusion, and the need for meaningful state reforms and funding increases. We have much more room to grow. If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way that they learn. Ignacio Estrada. Inclusion ensures that all students are considered in every aspect of teaching and learning. On a piece of paper or in a document on your computer, I'd like you to jot down a few ideas in response to this prompt. And if you're willing to share, please list them in the chat if you prefer. And I'll give you a few minutes to generate your ideas. The prompt is, my ideal inclusive education for students would include. Now take a moment and list all of the aspects or characteristics you would want to see or experience in every classroom that demonstrates your ideal. What does each classroom feel like? What do you want to hear in a classroom that's inclusive? And what does each classroom look like? What's the climate? I ask these questions to get your dreams written down so that we might begin making them into reality. And of course, I can't see the chat, so I'm hoping that we're populating some really great ideas there. This is Kyle, my loving son, best ever uncle, amazing brother, archery champion, driver's license holder, motorcycle owner, culinary arts student who lives on the spectrum. Kyle began his education in an early intervention program that provided him the opportunity to learn with other children experiencing disabilities and typically developing peers. He spent half his day there and then was provided with transportation to Eugene Montessori School. In his early preschool career, Kyle didn't talk to others very much. He preferred talking to himself, which could be a bit disruptive. He could repeat 10 minutes or more of dialogue from a movie, playing all the roles perfectly. But he couldn't ask me for a drink of water, couldn't tell me he was hungry, or know how to ask for help. Yet being in a fully included preschool, he thrived. In 1997, when it came time to enter elementary school, it was recommended that he enroll in a regional learning center rather than his neighborhood school. His dad and I didn't agree with the placement decision, but there was very little wiggle room. A regional learning center was his placement. Seeing no leeway, I approached my principal at the elementary school in Springfield where I taught about enrolling Kyle. We've been working toward more inclusion at the facility, and many of our teachers were committed to making it work. Working with the district, Springfield arranged a one-for-one exchange with our neighborhood Eugene School District. Kyle started kindergarten fully included and began to blossom. Ironically, 2 years later, at the end of Kyle's first grade year, I was hired to be the principal of our neighborhood elementary school. It had been my elementary school too, and Kyle began second grade fully included, and for the first time was able to enjoy recess with his brother, sister, and other neighborhood children that he knew. Then came middle school. This was the transition I was most concerned about. Fortunately for us, his middle school principal was a former special education teacher and already had strategies in place to ease the move. His sixth grade year was exciting, and he was again met with support and care. 2 years later, when he was in eighth grade, I was the principal of that same middle school, which also, coincidentally, I had attended as a middle school. With initial planning from previous leadership, we worked to support students in experiencing what it means to be an advocate and a caring human. To begin this work, staff had divided up the 12 specific areas of non-discrimination from our school board policy to teach students about these areas of non-discrimination over the course of 3 years of their middle school education. This meant that over the course of their middle school experience, students were educated on areas through a variety of activities, assemblies, discussions, lessons, etc., organized through homeroom, which was multi-grade. Ability was one of those categories. And reflecting back on that time, 2 moments clearly stand out. The first moment was when we asked students experiencing disabilities to anonymously write about their experiences at our school. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. We asked our leadership student, experiences with staff, students, and the overall climate were what we were looking for. We asked our leadership students to read the letters aloud at an all-school assembly. Each student began by saying, I'm reading for student number, and they would fill in the blank. It might be student number 7. I'm reading for student number 6. I'm reading for student number 11. And then the student would begin to read the letter aloud. There was a lot of revealing information in those letters, harsh truths. As students read letter after letter, people began to cry, adults and students alike. It turned out we'd either been doing great work for some or hadn't been doing our best work for others. We weren't consistent. We needed to do better. I'd never been in a school assembly of over 600 students with very few dry eyes. Following the assembly, teachers and students returned to their classroom, and each homeroom engaged in brainstorming about how to improve school life for students experiencing disabilities. What transpired was a plan of action that was student-led and adult-supported. Inclusion became the norm, and exclusion was questioned, not just by adults, but by students as well. I tell you that story to tell you this one, because the second moment was the result of the first. When Kyle was in high school, he experienced less inclusion, and he was not known to half of the student body who had come from a neighboring middle school. One particular day, I was contacted by the assistant principal who called to tell me that Kyle had been spit on by another student. The student had said to Kyle, "What does it take to make you angry?" and spit on him to see if he would react. Hearing the story and then fearing there was more, I asked, "How's Kyle, and do I need to come over to the school?" He told me that actually Kyle was fine. He said, "You don't really need to do anything." The other kids who know Kyle stepped in and addressed the situation. They weren't happy with what had happened, and they made certain that the student knew, and rather than mess with him, get to know Kyle. There was some form of discipline given over the spitting incident, but I was actually more interested and excited that the activities that had begun in middle school had made their way to the high school. There we go. Sorry, there's stuff covering up my screen, so I can't see what I wanted to say here. You may be wondering why I'm telling you this about my son. And I tell you this story because there are hundreds of thousands of Kyles and other children like him across the US. I share this example because it so effectively, to me, demonstrated that inclusion isn't just something you do to change your practices. It's a fundamental way of being. It's a consciousness that once developed can't be made unconscious. It's a story of what is possible. We will know that inclusive education has really become embedded in our culture when the term becomes obsolete. I wonder, what would inclusive education embedded in our culture look like? I would ask all of us to consider how our culture and climate play one of the most important roles in the development of inclusive education. Wherever there is oppression, there's resistance. Eduardo Bonilla Silva, racism without racists. We must come to see that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals. Without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the primitive forces of social stagnation. So we must help time and realize that the time is always right to do right. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Friends, inclusion is important to all of us. Inclusion for students experiencing disabilities needs our time and attention. In order to give this effort your time and energy, you will absolutely need to take care of you first. The whole oxygen mask analogy definitely applies here. We've got to take care of ourselves before we can really truly take care of others. May you be happy. May you be strong. May you feel like you belong. Remember to use your superpowers for good, and a gentle reminder that self-care is one of the most important things you can do to make you be happy, to help you be strong, and make you feel like you belong. And it's with tremendous appreciation for all of your efforts on behalf of our children. I thank you for your time, and please enjoy the rest of your day.